vegan. So I realize that this is a very unusual time to be doing a vegan live stream, but sometimes you just have to do it when you can. And I live in the Southern Hemisphere, and so um, the time zones are very different. So there might be some people here, from the East Coast. And if you're not there and you're somewhere else, you might be able to catch this live stream. But anyway, some people will be able to see it tomorrow when they get up. So I wanted to share this heartfelt essay from someone from Gentle World, which is a vegan intentional community, and her name is Elisa Rutherford Fortunati, and I think it's once again highlighting the very obvious sentience and the very important factor that what we're doing when we're not vegan, what we're doing to other sentient beings when we're not vegan. And this happens to be a story from a dairy farm, which she shares about a particular animal called Bruno. And the title of the essay is Bruno, A New Perspective on Happy Cows. Sitting in my office in downtown Boston, I stared out the frosted glass and dreamed of Italy, a small farm filled with animals wandering in green pastures, clucking at my heels, waiting eagerly to have grain and hay thrown into their troughs. One more month and I would be volunteering on a small organic dairy farm, nestled in the pristine Italian countryside. While I had been vegetarian for 5 years at that point, I loved cheese, and the idea of being as close to the source as possible was enticing. I wanted to know where my food came from, to be part of its growth and life. What could be more idyllic than to live my life by the chimes of the church bell, and oscillating calls of impatient cows? When I first arrived, the farm was everything I had hoped for. Each morning I awoke to church bells I had dreamed of. After a classic European breakfast, complete with fresh milk, I trudged up the hill to clean out the cow and goat stalls and feed the chickens. Then, if the weather suited, I would go for a walk in the woods with the goats or down to the pasture with the cows. It was serene. The story I truly want to tell you, though, is about one cow in particular, a cow to whom I owe a great deal, Bruno. The first time I met this funny cow, I had to jump out of the way as he attempted to lick my jacket. Once, when I was distracted, his tongue caught me on the arm. I would later compare the sensation to being licked by a wet Brillo pad. Bruno never walked down to the grazing pasture with us because he was a bull and too unpredictable. But each morning he waited impatiently for his share of milk, alongside a female cow who was pregnant with her first calf, and Max, a smaller variety of bull. I loved giving them their morning milk. Never once did I question the inherent strangeness in taking the milk from Max's mother and the other two lactating cows, walking 100 feet, and then feeding a portion of this milk out of a bottle to Max and out of a trough to Bruno. They were simply adorable animals that I was thrilled to feed. These cows were quote-unquote lucky. They even got milk, although at times it was partially powdered or had an egg in it when there was not enough milk for both of us and them. Life went on like this for a month and a half. And then a piece of paper entitled Bruno started floating around the house. Paul, 50 kilos, Nicole, 125 kilos, Lupo, 25 kilograms. They were dividing up Bruno's body for consumption. My host, who was a vegetarian, said it was her least favorite part of owning a dairy farm. She had warned me before I even arrived that she had to sell some animals to pay for the care of the others. but I never fully understood what that meant. At that time, I spoke of praying for their souls and being glad they had lived a good life, a happy life. After another 2 weeks, the list was complete. My host said that the following Saturday, a friend would be coming to help move Bruno to a temporary holding stall before he was put in the butcher's truck. As Saturday morning approached, my fellow volunteers and I waited eagerly to see if Bruno would put up a fight. He still had his horns and had quickly grown to a hefty size under our care. My host and her friend took off up the hill, their breath hanging in the air above the slowly rumbling tractor. Those of us left in the house waited for the sound of the tractor to disappear and then paced, paused, and pondered its return. The time seemed to drag on forever. Finally, we heard the tractor slowly descending. As it rounded the bend, we saw that there was no fighting bull, no struggle. Bruno, tied to the tractor, slowly walked behind, calmly being led by someone he trusted. We were the only mothers he had ever really had the chance to know. Why would he put up a fight? Why would he distrust the hands that fed him and scratched his chin? The next morning, Bruno was gone. A day later, his body came home in pieces. Being a vegetarian at the time, my host did not ask if I wanted to try the meat I had helped to quote-unquote raise, but my fellow volunteers were asked if they wanted to have hamburgers that night. They hesitated, which was one of the few things at the time that made the acid in my stomach turn. If they could eat meat in general, why couldn't they eat an animal they had helped to raise? They finally relented and dined on Bruno that night. As I left the house that evening, the smell of hamburgers still clinging to my clothes, I almost tripped over a long white object lying in the driveway. It was Bruno's spine, left as a treat for the dogs. Tiny bits of pink flesh, were still clinging in between the vertebrae. I could not connect this piece of flesh and bone to the animal I had loved. Instead, I simply turned away, went into my room, and fell asleep. I woke the next morning and wrote to family and friends how his death had not bothered me. A lie, although I knew it was not. Although I knew it not at the time. I wrote that, quote, I will be a veggie until the day I die, but living and working on this farm has allowed me to accept death as a natural part of life, end quote. It took me months to realize that I shut down that night, that to simply turn away from the bones of this animal, an animal I had loved and cared for, meant turning off a part of myself, my willingness to accept his death as a natural part of life, quote unquote, signaled that I had yet again pushed away the essential understanding that I was born with, that we are all born with. Life is precious and not ours to take. This understanding seems so simple now that it appears ridiculous to defend any other perspective. But as I know from my own life experience, it is often the things we intuitively know are wrong that we defend so vehemently. Upon rereading my emails and blogs from this time, anger and shame well in my heart, and tears are not far behind. I realize now that I was complacent towards the existence of these creatures. I accepted the use and abuse of their bodies for my desire for milk and others' desire for meat. And now I find that the only way I can ask for forgiveness for my part in Bruno's death is by telling his story. This is not the story of a factory farm. It is the story of a beautiful farm with quote-unquote free-range animals who seem to be quote-unquote happy. They were labeled happy because someone cared enough about them to quote-unquote minimize the abuse of their bodies before they were killed. Now, as I go about my life, awake and vegan, pictures of these animals float across my mind. Bruno, Hortensia, the first cow I ever saw skip with joy, Marialana, my favorite goat, struggling to carry her last kid, and Max, the smallest calf and the next to be sold for meat. I see their shining eyes eagerly waiting for me to deliver their morning milk, hoping for a bit of green hay or a scratch on the chin. I know these were animals capable of being happy and that they had this chance stolen from them. Please go vegan. And I'll give you the vegan resource, which is howtogovegan.org. And there it is there. So I wanted to just share my own, that's the end of that essay. And before I shared this with you, I tried to read it through without, and I found that I was getting quite overcome because I know exactly what she means by that. I've been living in rural Tasmania, now for about 10 years, and I've seen there's a lot of so-called happy farms around here. There's many, many farms that raise quote-unquote grass-fed cows and sheep and various, and what people would consider, the idyllic kind of raising of animals, the so-called humane, quote-unquote humane animal farming. And I've witnessed, we used to live next, we were surrounded at one point before I moved to this area. We were renting, and I was surrounded by this dairy farm, and on a regular basis they would separate the cows from their calves, just like this Bruno, who was separated. He's no use to the dairy industry because he's a bull. Male calves are regularly killed on any dairy farm, whether it's a large dairy farm or a small one. And so I saw, the mother cows all crying and bellowing as their calves were being taken away and put on trucks. And it was absolutely horrific to watch. And I even filmed it because I thought this is something I need to film. I was vegan at the time. I'm vegan now, obviously, but it was something I wanted to film so that I could share this with others and say it's not just stories. I witness this on a regular basis, and you hear the mother calves after the mother cows after the calves are taken away. They go on like that for days sometimes, and gradually it tapers off, but you hear them crying in the night. And it's a particular cry, and then you see them, these cows, every day, marching themselves down to the milking shed because they have udders that are full of milk, and it's really painful for them. There are abnormally large udders, and it's painful, and they want to be milked, but that milk actually was meant for those calves that were stolen from them and taken away and murdered. And that's what the dairy industry is. That is dairy. That is behind every piece of cheese, there's a calf just like Bruno who trusts the people that he's been raised by, who trusts the people who, just like that man who was driving the tractor and he was walking obediently behind that tractor. They develop relationships with their captors, these non-human animals, naturally, because they've been fed by these people. And I've seen just like you would see a dog racing up to to their human guardian. I've seen cows running up to the people that come with the hay, and they're so excited, and their tails are flicking, and they're all dancing around them and nuzzling them. And I think, isn't this tragic? It's like they trust these people, and then we go ahead and we betray them every time. And this is all for completely unnecessary reasons because, and I say this regularly, we don't need animal products at all to survive. We can easily meet all our nutrition requirements from plants and other non-animal sources. So the only reason we can give for why these animals are their children are being stolen from them, they're and killed at 1 and 2 days old, or their children are being enslaved to replace them. The only reason we can give is because we think that these products taste good. And that's morally unjustifiable that 1 trillion land and aquatic animals are killed every year for trivial reasons of mostly palate pleasure, habit, convenience, or tradition. Because we can, a plant-based diet, and of course veganism is an ethical position which rejects using animals for food. That's meat, dairy, eggs, honey, clothing, that's leather, fur, silk, wool, entertainment, and other reasons. It's an ethical position which rejects using sentient animals as resources, as property. The only reason we can give, for using these animals in all these ways, even though, is because they taste good. And yet a plant-based diet is really, really, it's not only is it incredibly nutritious and brilliant for our health, it's also, there's so many cuisines and ethnic sorts of foods that you can eat. It's really, truly, totally yummy. I mean, and you only have to look online to see the absolutely, literally thousands and thousands of recipes. And there's more and more pre-made products coming, in supermarkets if you want that kind of thing. And it's really taking off, veganism. And just putting aside for a moment what I've just talked about, animal agriculture is destroying the environment with 51% of greenhouse gases, which, contributes to all the problems that climate change is bringing to the planet. The climate refugees, the Amazon rainforest being destroyed at 1 acre every minute because it's being cleared for animal agriculture. There's world hunger is caused greatly by animal agriculture because a lot of poorer countries are growing grain to export to these large animal farms so that the cows and other animals can eat grain, and they can't even afford to feed themselves in these countries. I could list off 100 or more major issues that are related to our consumption of animal products that is just frightening, and it's just morally wrong. I mean, in fact, it's privileged behavior to be eating animal products today. There's environmental and human rights activists being killed in Latin America on a regular basis because they've been protesting animal agriculture industry. So, they're just killing people. There's Bangladesh is going underwater because of climate change, and we're directly contributing to that if we consume animal products. Because it's undeniable. People can try and pretend that animal agriculture and that eating animal products isn't a problem, and they can point to the oil industry and to other industries, that these industries are what's destroying the planet. And it's very convenient to do that. But if you watch Cowspiracy, the sustainability secret, it's very clear that if we are not vegan, we are responsible for the sixth mass extinction. We are responsible for millions upon millions of animals being poisoned, drowned, trapped, and killed to quote unquote protect livestock. We are responsible for the Amazon rainforest being cleared at 1 acre every minute. And everything that means, all the animals that live there that we claim to, we fetishize and say how wonderful they are, even though they're no different from all the animals that are on our plates or the ones that we're wearing on our backs. You see what I'm saying? We are responsible for the destruction of a huge amount of the destruction of the environment, and we can take responsibility for that now. But these are the ancillary benefits of veganism, the environment and our health. That's another story where there's hundreds of thousands of people dying directly from the consumption of animal products in the amounts that we eat them. I mean, it's a massive health crisis directly caused by our consumption of animal products. So they're the ancillary benefits of veganism, addressing health and addressing the environmental destruction of animal agriculture. But the thing I would like us to take from this story about Bruno is that it's not enough to just stop eating flesh, decomposing flesh, because that's what it is. It's not enough to just stop doing that. And that flesh was once a sentient being, just like Bruno. It's not enough because dairy is even more harmful and violent than if one were only eating flesh alone. That's why the person who told this story was vegetarian, and she realized that these animals were actually a part of the dairy industry. These animals that were being regularly killed, just like Bruno. And every single second, an animal just like Bruno, a young calf, is being dragged across the slaughterhouse floor, sucking on the fingers of a slaughterhouse worker because they've been separated from their mother, and then they're killed. And also, there's also terrible violence in the egg industry as well. And I'll talk about that another time. But all animal products are products of violence. It's one could not argue that they are anything but products of violence. And that's why veganism, the ethical position, is such an important position today. It's one of the greatest social justice issues of the 21st century. It's one of the greatest grassroots nonviolent movements of the 21st century. And if we claim to care about nonviolence and justice, then we really must consider becoming vegan. And it's really not difficult. It's much easier today than it was when I became vegan 12 years ago. It's really, really not difficult at all. And I hope that you check out the site howtogovegan.org, which is a podcast that I made about a year ago, and it covers, it will help you internalize the ethical position, because that's the most important thing one needs to do, is internalize the ethical position, and then everything else follows very easily. So I hope that you will consider checking that out, howtogovegan.org. And I hope that next time, if you're not vegan and you're sitting down to a cheeseburger or a dairy latte, look into that cup, and instead of seeing just some sort of food, a drink, think about the sentient animal that was behind that. The mother cow, who is every year or even more frequently than that, is artificially impregnated on a rape rack. That's what they call it, a rape rack. She gives birth to these her children, and then her children are taken from her and killed, either killed because they're male or enslaved because they're female. And then she is enduring very, very painful, sometimes painful pregnancies, as well as painful udders and infections in her udders from mastitis, and all kinds of all the awful. And eventually, after about 5 years, the mother cow is killed, because the dairy industry no matter what, if they're organic dairy, they're not interested in cows that are not fully productive. So they kill any animals that get to about 5 years old. So there's tremendous violence in dairy and in eggs. So that's why vegetarianism is not enough. It's just not enough. You know, so you know, I implore you to just not go vegan because it's the green thing to do, even though that's absolutely undeniable. And don't go vegan because you want to lose weight or because you want to get healthy for a while or whatever. Don't go vegan for those reasons, because that will never hold. When it becomes inconvenient, that you'll abandon that, and that's not what an ethical position is. Like today, I saw an article about Beyonce having a brief dalliance with being vegan. They said she was vegan for a little while. Well, you can't be vegan for a little while any more than you can be anti-racist for a little while. You either internalize the ethical position and you remain vegan, or you know or you're just adopting a plant-based diet for health reasons or whatever. And that's what Beyonce was doing, adopting a plant-based diet for health reasons. So that's why, you know, when people say that celebrity was vegan for a while, that's not true. There's no such thing really as an ex-vegan, because just as if when you realize that racism is wrong, well then, you know, you don't sort of sometimes be racist and other times not. You realize that it's not acceptable. And the same thing goes with speciesism. You reject it once and for all. Anyway, so that's really all I wanted to say. Um, I just want people to realize that there's even more violence in dairy than there is if one was only eating flesh alone. And you know, we don't need to do any of this. We don't need to be participating in the torture and killing of 1 trillion land and aquatic animals every year. We really don't. So let's really, you know, consider becoming vegan and staying vegan. And once again, I invite you to check out that resource, howtogovegan.org. So thanks very much for watching. My name's Trish Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Vega. Till next time, bye for now.